our financial activity is so much faster and blurrier. We enter into commitments and debts and so on. Where does this reflect in our wills? Do we keep track of these matters? Right? So this is very significant. Right? Where are you with respect to your will? And it's not difficult. It does not take more than a few hours to at least make a skeletal will. There are wills around. Most Islamic associations have some semblance of a will. And if you go and check online, there's a number of resources to get those wills. This is a pressing, immediate financial responsibility you have. And the Prophet ﷺ said it very clearly that no one should go to sleep without having a will in place. And the will, of course, is not just with respect to inheritance. There may be things that you borrowed from certain people. You need to keep track of your debts to other people. And your debts are monetary debts, but also things that you've borrowed from people. So the car that you drive, it belongs to Uncle Big. Right? Because you crashed your car into the tree when you were reflecting on something you said to your wife. And you said, Astaghfirullah. But as you said, Astaghfirullah, you closed your eyes and you ran into the tree. Right? And your car was totaled. So you're driving Uncle Big's car. But what if you were to do something silly again? Right? And next time you get totaled, right? Instead of the car. You need to keep track of the debts you owe other people. Material debts and other things. Matters that you've borrowed and so on. And it's not difficult to keep track of these things, but it's a sign of commitment that you need to have. So this is one aspect. Now, why do we have these limits? The reason we have these limits is in order that we not harm ourselves nor harm other people. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "La darara wa la dirar." There should be one should neither be harmed nor harm others. Right? So when you don't do this, you're harming yourself in the akhirah, but you may also be harming those whose rights are unfulfilled. You pass away, what about the money that you borrowed from your next door neighbor? Right? Once they divvy up your estate, and your next door neighbor may not come and claim it from you. Right? Because it was a couple $100, and it looks bad. Someone passed away, and they say, "Excuse me, Sister Zubaydah owed me $500. Right? And there's nothing written about it. She doesn't claim it in this life, but what happens in the akhirah? In the akhirah, as long as that debt wasn't cleared, in this life, your next door neighbor may not consider it significant. Right? She may have been embarrassed. But as long as she did not absolve you in this life, either you paid her or absolved her of that debt, in the akhirah, that person, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, will claim that debt. In the akhirah, every person will be needy. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ asked the Sahaba, who is the bankrupt person? أَتَدْرُونَ مَنِ الْمُفْلِسِ? In the hadith is sahih. The Sahaba said, and the Sahaba were smart, right? When the Prophet ﷺ asked the question, they saw that he's not asking the obvious. Because the Prophet ﷺ wasn't sent to test them on their economic intelligence or their common worldly sense. Right? Who's a bankrupt person? Everyone knows who a bankrupt person is. So the Sahaba hedged their answer. Right? They did some hedging. They said, well, according to us, the bankrupt person is the one who has no dinars or dirham, the one who doesn't have any wealth. But they said, according to us, because they realized that what you're getting at is probably something deeper and broader. And the Prophet ﷺ told them that the bankrupt person is the one who comes on the Day of Judgment, having done good deeds, yet they wronged this person, and they hurt this person, they harmed that person, and they did not fulfill another's right. And what will happen? One's good deeds will be taken on the Day of Judgment in repayment of these debts and these wrongs, until one has no good deeds left. And then what happens? One is encumbered by their sins, until one's scale tilts and preponderates on the side of wrongdoing, and one becomes liable to be punished for one's sinfulness. Because little sins may be excused, but rights are something very, very serious. So these limits And these sunnahs that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, of which we're going to look at some key sunnahs, help us avoid this great harm. What is the attitude by which we pursue our worldly interests in the deen? And there's a Quranic verse that I'll point to. Take note of this verse and reflect on it. The scholars and commentators of tafsir have mentioned that this is one of the verses that summarizes the Quranic paradigm for life and the balance of the believer in their pursuit of their relative and eternal interests. And this verse is in the 28th surah, verse 77. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, ابتغي بما آتاك الله الدار الآخرة. Seek with what Allah has granted you the next abode. And seek with what Allah has granted you the next abode. ولا تنس نصيبك من الدنيا وأحسن كما أحسن الله إليك. But do not forget your share of this life, and do good as Allah has done good to you. And do not seek to spread corruption on earth, for Allah does not like those who spread corruption. This verse tells us numerous lessons. Jot down the verse number, Surah 28, verse 77. Reflect on it. A few quick things. This verse tells us what our primary purpose is, as is obvious. It tells us about the nature of this life. What is this life? This life is a gift for you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? He has granted you what you have of material matters. What do we do with the gift? We're supposed to be appreciative of these blessings. And we're supposed to direct them as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has called us to. Right? There's many reminders of the importance of thankfulness here. Third, what are we supposed to be doing? وَأَحْسِن. Act with excellence. Ahsin. Right? Act with excellence. Do the good. And this entails avoiding the opposite. And in all of that, what is the concern of the believer? The pursuit of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this of course tells us about something, about the error of thinking of the believer. A lot of people who are religious, they have this attitude that my religious engagement is my going to the mosque, my activism, my learning, right? My recitation of Quran, or my social work that I do. But my job, this is dunya. And we say, no, it's not dunya. This is just wrong. Right? This understanding is not wrong. We do not see anything of our worthy pursuits to be dunya. Because what is dunya? What is that this world in the blameworthy sense that it is used in the Quran and the Sunnah? الدنيا ما شغلك عن الله. Worldliness. Dunya is probably best translated as worldliness. What is worldliness? Worldliness is that which busies you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But our financial transactions, our dealing, our buying and selling, none of this is dunya. Why? Because for us, it is a means of doing good. Right? It's a means of doing good. It's a means of thanking Allah. It's a means of drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is a deeply spiritual act. You're going to work. You're even going to shopping. It's meant to be a deeply spiritual and meaningful act because you are seeking the pleasure of Allah. You are seeking to thank Allah. Right? So this is very important in having that paradigm. But then when you see it in this way, then you realize that these matters are blessings. So when you have a blessing, you're careful to use it in the right way. Right? Because you're a guest in this life. And this is also what the Prophet ﷺ emphasized, our attitude. Right? Our attitude. What is the attitude of the believer? The Prophet ﷺ took Ibn Umar by the shoulder when he was just a youth and said to him, كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر سبيل. In the hadith in Bukhari, that be in this life as though a stranger or one journeying. Right? Well, this hadith sounds shocking, but what does this mean? The stranger, the gharib, is the one who's in a foreign land. Right? So if you're a stranger somewhere, what do you try to do? You try to be comfortable. Right? I went to London last week. It was a very interesting trip. My first concern is, where am I staying? Right? You want to be comfortable. But I had certain things to do. I had a number of programs I had to do. So I wouldn't be comfortable in a way that would not enable me to fulfill the purpose for which I am in that strange land. Right? Be in this life as though a stranger or one journey. When you're traveling, imagine if you're going from here to Las Vegas. Someone was explaining why all Islamic conferences should be held in Las Vegas. It was a very interesting argument. I said, well, perhaps outside Las Vegas. They said, no, inside Las Vegas. I said, well, there must be a difference of opinion about that one. It's cheap. They said flights are cheap. There's large conference centers there. And I said, well, don't say anything else that's there, right? Right. So anyways, you're journeying. If you're on a long journey, you try to make your journey comfortable. Let's say you're driving. Right? You fix up your car. You make sure you have the right GPS. Right? And if you're taking a GPS, take a real GPS. The tinky GPSs on the iPhone just doesn't cut it. Trust me. I tried. And so you make arrangements. You have things to eat and drink on the way. You know where you're going to stop. All these things. But you make sure you don't do it at the expense of reaching your destination. Right? You have a sense of your destination. Similarly, when we're in this life, we should pursue our pleasures in this life, but in a manner that does not vitiate us from getting to our goal. And in that, these day-to-day matters, we make all kinds of foolish mistakes. And because we don't have a sense of why we're pursuing this life journey, it's like the person who's traveling by road and they say, oh look, it looks like a nice, there's a nice panoramic view here. Let's stop the car, and you start looking, oh that's really nice. And then you go down and say, oh look, they have a really nice place, they have waffles. Organic waffles. So you stop there and you have waffles. And you do this and that, and you're just not getting to your destination. If anything, you're even going off the route that you're supposed to have taken. Right? Whereas one who's journeying has a sense of their destination. Right? Has a sense of their destination. What is our destination? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran. The goal is seeking Allah in the last day. Having a realization in our day-to-day transactions that وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, that the next life is better for you than this life. So what does that mean? It means that we must pause. Right? We must pause. We must realize that our day-to-day dealings are of significance. Because if we act without knowledge, it's inevitable. Right? It is inevitable that we will fall into the haram. Sometimes directly, and sometimes indirectly. The Prophet ﷺ told us in the famous hadith that many of us may be aware of, that the lawful is clear and the unlawful is clear. And between them are matters unclear, that most do not know about. So whoever avoids the unclear has safeguarded their religion and their honor. But whoever falls into the unclear, what happens? The Prophet ﷺ said something worthy of noting. He said, whoever falls into the unclear has fallen into the haram. He didn't say that whoever falls into the unclear could fall into the haram. He used a past tense. من يقع في الشبهات وقع في الحرام. He used a past tense. That whoever falls into the unclear, and what's the unclear? ما لا يعلم حكمه. That whose ruling is not known. You don't know whether it's allowed or not. You don't know whether this is the right way of doing it. What's the consequence? It's inevitable that at least sometimes you end up doing what's wrong. Sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. Right? Sometimes indirectly.